Megan, I am so excited to have you on the podcast because we found each other through social media. And I have to tell you, I feel like you're like my spirit animal, soul sister. I don't even know.
Same, 100%. We have to find reasons to talk after this because we have
I
so
know.
much to share.
I know. I agree. And even just as I was reading through your formal bio, which I've gotten to know you a lot over the last several weeks, I was reading through your formal bio and I'm like, I mean, legit, this is so similar. So I'm really, really excited. I know that you're going to bring so much value to our listeners today. So you guys get ready because Megan is going to drop some truth. This is going to be fun. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so obviously I've already kind of introduced you to the audience, but if you'll tell everybody just a little bit more about you, who you are, and kind of how you got here.
Absolutely. So I have been officially a wedding planner now for 10 years, but I worked in the hospitality industry for 5 years before that. I actually never was one of those people. And Brandee, this is something we haven't discussed, but I was never one of those people that was like, I want to be a wedding planner. Were you that way?
I always wanted to be a party planner. Yes, but I never thought I would do weddings. I thought I would do big corporate events, which is what I did before this. So that's interesting that you thought that. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually wanted to be a pastry chef and I
Oh,
wanted to go
really?
to culinary school. But I learned that I actually just like to eat pastries. I don't like to make them as much as I like to eat them.
Did you ever go to culinary school? No, right?
No, I was a senior in high school and I was planning to go to culinary school, but I think my parents picked up on the vibe that I had no idea what I wanted to do because, like, I don't know, 4 months before, I was like, I'm going to be a kindergarten teacher. I'm going to be an artist, all these things. So they were like, Megan, why don't we do this? Why don't you go and get a 4 year degree? And then if you're still feeling culinary school after that, by all means, have at it. And my freshman year in college, I took it was like introduction to hospitality. And I remember the professor, he had worked at the University of Las Vegas. He had worked for large corporations, all sorts of hotels. And I fell in love with hotels and hospitality at that point. I just
Okay.
knew that that was kind of the path that I wanted to go down. So I did follow that. I worked for Marriott for about 5 years in different roles. Um, from starting at the front desk to banquet operations, where I had to wear a men's red suit coat, and it was really not
Were
good.
you a red coat?
I
Yes.
was a red coat. I
That's so
was.
funny. I started at Gaylord, which is now a Marriott, but wasn't at the time. And they started the green coat program based on Marriott's red coat. And that's how I started. So this is even more funny, Megan. I love this story.
So funny. Yes. So I did that for a few years and then I moved into the catering and sales side of things. And then back in 2010, I got married. And about 3 weeks after getting married, I reached out to a local planner here in my market. And I was just kind of ready for that next step in my career. I had been
Yeah.
working in hotels for a while. And so I was hopeful that she might have a position where I could come on and work underneath her. I didn't know her that well, but I knew of her company. And she got back to me. We set up a time to meet at this coffee shop near the hotel where I was working. I got there, I had my reference letter. I had this corporate hotel background. So I had reference letters,
Of
I had
course.
testimonials, I had a resume. And I'll never forget, she was late, like 5, 10, 15 minutes had gone by, and she blows in. She had sunglasses on top of her head, a strapless sundress, and she sat down next to me and she was like, I'm burned out.
Oh,
I'm looking for someone to take over my business later on this year. I'm moving to DC and I have 4 weddings on the books for next year that I need for someone to like take over. And yeah, I was like, oh, dang, this is officially not a job interview. And I guess you don't need all these things. And I
and
went home to my husband, who, again, as I said, we'd been married like 3 weeks at this point.
right.
And I remember saying to him, like, oh, it was such a bummer. I thought that it was going to be an opportunity to go work for her, but it's not. And I'm obviously not going to leave my full time, great paying job at this property to go take over this business that I know nothing about. And my husband was like, yes, yes,
What?
we're going to take out a small business loan, and this is what you were meant to do. Like, this is the path that you have to go down. We can't miss this opportunity. And it's funny to tell that story because I just put out a podcast episode today, for my podcast about the people that you need in your life, and one of them is the cheerleader, the one that's going
Mhm.
to, like, see the good in you that you may not see yourself at times and
Yep.
push you to take risks, and that is 100% my husband.
Aw, I love that so much, and I think that's so important to have that person who believes in you when you don't, because Lord knows this industry is a roller coaster, right? Entrepreneurship is a roller coaster.
Yes.
But just somebody that's always telling you, "You can do it," and they believe in you when you don't even believe in yourself. I love that he said, "Yes, let's go for it." That's crazy.
Yes. Yes, I left my job. We did take out a small business loan. I took over ownership. I purchased this existing business, and the story could stop there. The longer, more intense version of it, which we won't go into today, but here's the Cliffs Notes version: is
Yes, I love it.
I bought a really bad business.
Oh,
Terrible reputation, removed from all venue lists that you would want to be on, working as a planner. And there was a lot of interesting stories that came about from the original owner. So there were definitely moments where I was like, oh my, what did I do? What
yeah,
happened here? But that's very much in the past 10 years later. And things are great, obviously, all things considering a pandemic and COVID and
exactly. Yeah.
you know,
Yes, because we're recording this in November of 2020. So it's very, very much still pandemic right now, lockdown in some states. So is it still named the same name as you bought it?
it is, yeah, the same name. And yeah, we just celebrated 10 years this past July, and there's a team. Now there are, let's see, there's four of us on the team doing weddings. And I recently took kind of that professional step myself to stop taking on events to put
Yeah.
focus into consulting and education, which is another thing that I know you and I have in common. But
Yeah.
yeah, 10 years is a long time, as you know, with your own experience, to be
Yes.
working in an event industry that feels very 24/7 with high maintenance clients. And I think that kind of ties into what we're going to talk about today.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk about this. So that is really a fun story and I love that so many people ask about if I were to buy a business, what questions would I ask? And this is not what this episode is about. But because you have bought a business and very few people have, would you just give anybody maybe one or two questions that you would say or tips that you would say to think about if you were thinking about buying someone else's business?
Absolutely. So, I obviously, when we purchased this business, I don't think that we did a lot of the things that the way you should have. So, I learned a lot
Mhm.
from that process. You definitely need to have a really solid picture of what the past several years of business look like. You
Mhm.
need to understand the number of inquiries that are coming in, the client process. You need to take a full picture of, like, the reviews and testimonials, the relationships. That's the piece that, like, I
Mm,
don't, and I still to this day I'm not quite sure how you would really dive into that if you were
right.
purchasing a business, because you can't go around and start asking. It's very interesting because you have to, certain things are on the table and certain things are off the table as to what you're
Mhm.
allowed to discuss when it comes
Mhm.
to purchasing a business. But the financial side is, of course, a big thing. And then I would say 100% hire a professional to help guide you through it and get an evaluation of the business as to what it's actually worth.
Yeah, I think those are great questions. We also bought a very, very small business. It was just a tiny piece of ours. And because we were able to buy it with cash, we did not have people poking holes the way they probably should have or would have if we
Yes.
needed the loan. And so for me, I was like, I almost wish we wouldn't have had the cash to buy it because there was just so many things I know a professional would have pushed us on. And we had an
Yes.
attorney close all the paperwork. But for us, it was just kind of like ask so many questions. And like you said, it's not just financial, it's also just ask about inquiries coming in. And because at the point
Mhm.
that someone's burned out and just wants out, they likely haven't been working their business hard for a while. And
Nope.
so they're kind of leaving you with a mess.
But when you're in your mid-20s and all of a sudden this opportunity is there, you're like, "Wow, this is great. This is gonna be
Yes.
easier than starting a business from scratch. It's a ready-made business." Nope.
Oh, no. Okay,
Nope.
well, we might have to do another episode on that topic because, it's funny because people know I did buy a business. It it's a question I get asked all the time, and I'm like, I really don't I'm not at a place to share a lot about it just because I'm like, "You know what? Learn from my lesson. I'll tell you all the lessons another time."
There we go. That'll be
Yeah,
our
that's right.
follow-up episode.
That's right. We will. So today we are talking about boundaries. And you guys, here around the first of the year, I'm so excited to kind of help you guys to navigate boundaries because I know it's taken me, oh my gosh, it took me a lot of learning the hard way. Would you say that was the same for you, Megan?
100%. So, Brandee, I think it's just natural that in the creative industry,
Mhm.
we so many of us are people pleasers and we are empathetic, right?
Mhm.
Like we want to
Yes.
pour everything in and we want to go. We are trained truly, especially from
Yeah.
those of us that, you and I working in the hotel side of things, you're trained to go above and beyond and exceed expectations. And when you are early in your business, you go into what, you know, many of us refer to as hustle mode, right? It's
Uh-huh.
like
Yes.
I'm going to pour into this. I'm going to do everything that I have to succeed and
Mhm.
grow. And what happens, I believe, is that sometimes we forget to take those moments to stop and figure out where you go from hustle into like maintain.
Yes.
And I know so many entrepreneurs that just go, 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 go.
Mhm.
And that leads to what I know I have been through. And I don't know if you have experienced this,
Mhm.
but burnout, like burnout and resentment.
Yes, absolutely resentment. I mean, just like, the previous owner of your business that you were just talking about, at some point, you can't keep up a hustle mentality. And I think a lot of times when you're in hustle mentality, you can often book the wrong type of clients because they also don't respect you. I know that when I work with clients that I set the boundaries early, they respect my time and they know that I'm going to get back to them immediately, but it's not going to be at midnight on a Thursday night, or
Right.
at bedtime. If you text me, I tell my clients, hey, if you have a thought and you need to get it out of your head and texting me is the easiest way, that's totally fine. I'll email it to myself and I'll send you a response the next day. Or if I'm working up late, I might text you back. But that's not, you can't expect for me to constantly be on my phone, especially when I'm putting my kids to bed and things like that. So I know, like, I'd love to hear some of the stories where you've experienced this because I know I have my own and I just think, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. But yeah,
Oh
what
my
what
gosh.
kind of things have you experienced?
Well, I want to hear after I share mine. I feel like this is confession time. So you're going to have to share at least one to make me
Oh my
feel like
gosh.
I'm not that crazy. But here we go. I made a list for you because I started thinking about over 10 years. What are the crazy things that I have done when I have not had boundaries in place? Because I would say for me, in 10 years, for the first 6 years,
Hmm.
that's where it was
Yes.
just go, go, go. I've used this analogy that my business was growing. It was growing like a weed,
Uh-huh.
and I wasn't taking time. And this goes back to you, what you covered in my membership
Hmm.
recently about figuring out like where your values are and
Hmm.
where you're growing. I wasn't doing that. So it was just
Yeah.
growing and it was growing like a weed and I wasn't pruning it. So I was taking on clients that weren't the right fit. I was just, it was a mindset that was not great, and it did lead to some burnout, and it did lead to working with clients that didn't align with the values of my business. So I
Mhm.
think right around 2016 is when I started to recognize that and start to make changes and adjust like how my team handled weddings as well. But let's hear some stories from 2010 to 2016. These are great.
That's so funny. Can I ask you one question before that, just really quick? Because
Of
a lot of
course.
the people that are listening are in that mentality. A lot of my listeners are new business
Mhm.
owners, or they're kind of just deciding what they're going to do. And so, do you think that that shift in your mindset was because you hit burnout, or was it because you hit a financial status that you were able to say no? Because I feel like that's what everyone says to me. They're like, yeah, you can turn away clients now. And I'm like, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think I just learned it the hard way. So, have you thought about that?
I learned it the hard way as well, and it was burnout. It
Okay. Yeah.
it absolutely was for me. It
Hmm.
was not the financial side of things because we were, taking on more luxury clients. We were
Hmm.
raising our price year after year, but it was still just not recognizing capacity
Yeah.
and not even recognizing that I was like charging straight towards burnout.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. That's super
yeah.
helpful, because I want everybody listening to know that, I talk about a lot that there's seasons of hustle, and that's totally fine. Like, I definitely think there's times where you have to put 1,000% in and you just go.
Mhm.
But there has to be a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, it has to be a season so that you can give yourself a break. And it might be to roll out a new product, or, engagement season. I mean, it's like all hands on deck, no one sleeps, everyone takes
Mhm.
consults no matter what.
Mhm.
And so, but that's for a season, because we know the phones are ringing off the hook. So, and
Right.
then we slow down and we maintain, like you said. So I find that interesting, but I want everybody to kind of hear that we're not telling you to never hustle. We're just saying don't hustle forever, and not take time to just stop and be excited about what you just did. Set a goal and then relish in it, then set a new one.
Do you listen to, the podcast How I Built This with Guy
Oh,
Raz?
every single person listening right now is cracking up, because I literally
Why?
am constantly like, this is my favorite podcast I've ever listened to.
I love it.
I listen to every single episode ever.
Okay, so I was listening to him on, Brene Brown's podcast, who I also love,
Uh-huh.
and Guy Raz said this quote, and I literally did the, like, 15 seconds back twice so I could write it down, and I was like, "Yes,
Uh-huh.
this is perfect," and this speaks to I think this will speak to you, to me, and to your listeners as well, but the
Mhm.
quote was along the lines of this: "Learning from others' mistakes is the only entrepreneurial shortcut." So
Yes.
what he was saying there is that like the only way to avoid some of the mistakes that you're going to go through early on in your entrepreneur journey
Yeah.
is having someone to help you understand like, hey, you're approaching this, like you're raging towards burnout, or
Mhm.
you are going down a path that you're not going to like what comes at the end of it.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that person. I don't know if you did. I
No, I
didn't.
did not.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I had, you know what? I shouldn't say I didn't. I had two really amazing people that came before me in the wedding industry. They were both well seasoned beyond my years. And I will say, every time I would get up the guts to say, will you help me figure this out? Both of them were so much more open than they ever needed to be, because technically they were my competition. And so I do
Mhm.
talk about them a lot on the show. So I don't want to say I didn't have anybody, but I certainly didn't. Coaching and group coaching and masterminds and courses did not exist then. So I had to actually like say, will you help me? Because I clearly can't figure this out. And I remember one of them saying to me, when I was trying to price a huge client, and I knew it was a massive client. I'd never taken anything like that before. And she said, I'm actually really glad you asked me, because so many new planners come in and they undercut pricing because they don't understand what goes into it. And then it makes all of us who are quoting a
Mhm.
normal rate for what they want look ridiculous and inflated. So she's like, I will happily help you learn how to price a big client because I'd rather you get it than some goofball new planner who
Yes.
doesn't know what they're doing. It makes us all look bad. And I was like, that's amazing. So I believe a lot in learning from other people and coaching and masterminds. I think it's brilliant.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. And I think that I'm so glad that you show up that way for your community now. Like you are that resource for your listeners and for
Yes.
those entrepreneurs that are coming into the space after you. You're that one that says like, "Hey, like let me just like help you out here.
Give
Here's
you a
some of the
tip.
mistakes." Yeah.
Yeah, and you too. I mean, I love that there's so many planners that can follow along in your footsteps and you're like, I'm going to give you the tools that I didn't have that I had to create from nothing and learn that they didn't work and then restart and
Yes.
then now it's
Yes.
perfect and I'm going to give it
Yes.
to you, you know?
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think that that's brilliant.
Yeah. Okay. So back to my crazy mistakes. I think I was stalling on this because I'm a little scared to share them, but I
No,
wrote
these are
them
going to be
down.
fun. These are going to be
Okay.
fun.
All right. Early on in the hustle season of being a new wedding planner, I would meet with clients before the wedding day. So I would meet with them in the morning before I would go directly to the venue after to work a wedding. This is like totally different client that was in from out of town. I'd meet at like 10 in the morning. Then I would leave from there. I would go to the venue. I would work the wedding from 11 a.m. until 12 a.m. that night, midnight. And then I would meet with other clients on Sunday, the day after the
What?
wedding. Yes, yeah, the wedding hangover day. I would go back to my office and I would have other like new consults, probably because my pricing was really cheap and I was just working all the time.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so there
That's a
was that.
lot.
Yeah, here's one that is extra. 2 years into being a new business owner, I found out I was pregnant,
Okay.
and I went to the doctor. They tell me my due date, and it turns out that my due date is the date of my biggest wedding that I've ever been hired for.
Uh-huh.
So I decided that it didn't matter. Like there was no such thing as boundaries, and I was going to work that wedding no matter what. It became this badge of honor that I'm
Of
going to show up. I'm
course.
going to work the wedding. So I lied about my due date to my clients, to vendors. I worked that wedding, um, and I worked on my due date until 10:30 that night. Left the wedding, went to the hospital, had my first daughter the next day, and then worked a destination wedding 6 weeks later.
That is insane, Megan.
It's the definition of like not having boundaries and being deeply in hustle mode and not realizing it's actually, and this is the part that is total reflection, is
Yeah.
for years I was proud of that. It was like,
That
look at me,
yes.
I'm a mom. I'm a business owner. I can do it all. I'm not proud of that. Like when I say that now, I'm like, God, no one do that. Please, if you're listening
No.
to this, do not prioritize your business over like the birth of a child or something like really important and special that you cannot go back and redo. Like there's no, I don't get to go back and relive those moments. I don't get to go back to those 6 weeks when I was a new mom and really treasure it. I was checking emails
Of
and
course.
just like deeply
Mhm.
invested in a wedding where the client was ungrateful and not respectful of boundaries. This is the one that was 6 weeks
Right.
afterwards. And yeah, if you hear anything from this episode today on boundaries, just know that like the moments in life and moments with family and those people that are important to you will outweigh how good of an X type of vendor you are at the end
Mhm.
of your life, you know?
Yes, I know. I mean, I can just kind of feel your pain in that because it happens way too often. And one of the things that I have noticed for myself is that, well, having kids obviously changes your perspective a lot because you realize that there's other people that depend on you. But I also, as I started to move out of the wedding industry, and clearly my company's still in it, but you and I both have stepped away from our companies a little bit in the day to day and moved into the coaching space. What's been really interesting to me is that the wedding industry as a whole prioritizes exhaustion.
Mm,
And my husband is like, "Do you think that that's really true?" I'm like, "With absolute certainty, it is how our industry runs. The more tired you are, the more exhausted you are, the more you're running in a billion directions. It's almost like you said, a badge of honor in
mhm,
our industry." And I always just took that as normal, and that's how I ran. And then I got into this coaching space where it's like the complete opposite, where they're like, I only work 3 hours a day. I never leave my house. I'm always in jammies. And you're like, what? I'm
yeah.
confused. And so finding that balance, but it's been really interesting for me. I've always been, I shouldn't say always. I'm passionate about helping other people find boundaries like you're talking about as well, because I think it's so important. But I was not always like that. I had the same issues, the same things that you're talking about. But as I've gotten into this coaching space, realizing that really whole industries don't believe like the wedding industry does. And I want to help bring that to more people in the wedding industry. Like it's okay to not look like a crazy person.
Yeah, I think that that's an amazing observation that you're sharing that I don't know that I have even realized because I'm so deep
Yeah.
still in the wedding world and working with planners. I just
Yeah.
know that for me, it's something that I honestly think about pretty regularly when I
Hmm.
think if I were to die tomorrow,
Hmm.
what would I be remembered for?
Oh,
And would planning really great events it wouldn't be what I want to be remembered for. That would
no.
be awful. That would be disgusting. I mean, I don't mean to say it that way, but it would be. And so I just think more about legacy now as I have
Yes.
had time to think on my business and where my business goes in the future. And these are things that if you're
Yeah.
listening to this, I would encourage you to do the same thing.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so that one's hard. There's some funnier ones. I'll share a lighter one. I once was hired by, I'm sure you have encountered this as well, but there was the couple, they had their priorities, and then there was the family, they had their
Uh-huh.
priorities.
Uh-huh.
The dad was like a stage manager for a large production company. So this wedding was a production, like with a
Okay.
capital P. And there was some friction between the couple and the parents, and the dad would call me all the time, and I was always available. He would text all the time. And at one point, he says to me, Megan, I want to work through a conversation with the groom. We'll call him Joe. And uh, he wanted me to role play with him in a phone conversation where I was Joe, like fully committed to the role of Joe in this capital P production. And he was going to be the dad, and he was going to like say all the things he wanted me to push back, really like own the role of Joe, the groom. And Brandee, I freaking did it. What in the world?
Of
What in the
course
world?
you did, because what were you gonna say? No, crazy dad. This is the most insane thing I've ever been asked to do. No, of course you're not gonna say
No.
that. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, Mr. Dad. I'm gonna do that for you, and I will do it with
Yes.
all of my heart.
I did with my Enneagram 3. I went
That
after
is
that role
amazing.
100%. Yes. So I have role played the role of a groom in a phone conversation with the dad before. Um, I've driven 2.5 hours to Charlotte, which is, I'm based in Raleigh, North Carolina. So Charlotte is about 2.5 hours from here. Driven 2.5 hours to pick up large candelabras from a floral rental company because my client wouldn't pay the delivery fee and I wanted to save them money. So I just
Oh,
drove. Gross.
oh my gosh, the things we've learned when clients were like, "Oh, I didn't want to pay the delivery fee," and we're like, "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll
Take
take
care of
care
it.
of it."
Yeah.
There's a reason that vendor was charging a fee for it, because they know.
Right. It's just devaluing your time and putting yourself on such a low priority level.
Yes.
And in the moment you think it's fine. Like it's fine. I want to make this client happy. I'm going
Yeah.
to do it. But it goes back to what I believe, the definition of boundaries are, which
Mhm.
is what are you okay with and what are you not okay with?
Mhm.
And then how are you going to withhold those boundaries in your personal life, which could be a whole other conversation. But this,
Yeah.
I'm speaking more, how are you going to uphold those professional boundaries so that you don't
Mhm.
do what I did or what, encounter what you went through, Brandee, with
Yes.
burnout or resentment or
Mhm.
doing things the really hard way or spending hours of time on something that you either weren't being compensated for or weren't in your job description.
Yep.
So those are just a few
Oh
crazy
my
things.
gosh. Yeah, I mean, just because I don't want you to be alone in this.
Please
As you were
share,
talking,
please.
I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like this is just getting all of my juices flowing of all the ridiculous things that we've done. And I'm sure there's a million more if I thought about it more. But I remember a bride dropped off all her personal items. And it was, I want to say it was the day before because we're a little psycho about not taking them on the day of, but it was there's nothing you can do about it the day before either. I don't know what we were thinking. And she drops off 16 chandeliers. And we were like,
What?
what exactly? Now, mind you, we asked them well in advance for a list of everything they're dropping off. Were these on the list? Of course they weren't. And so she couldn't find anyone to hang the chandeliers. She was getting married in a warehouse that had a drop ceiling like rafters, but it was like 24 feet up. And she
No.
wanted one over every table and she wanted us to hang them.
No. Oh,
What?
I
And
bet you did it. Did
of
you do it?
course we did it. Of course we did. We had all of our husbands, my husband, the lead planner's husband, the assistant planner's husband, all on site. We had these ridiculous ladders that we had to get my dad's truck to be able to move. I was like, what did we just do? We had those doors open by the skin of our teeth. I mean, and who would even think that that was something that you should give to your planner to do without
No.
discussing in advance? We would have
No.
hired like labor that knows what they're doing to do that. And another one that came to mind, and I think this is why I hate the store IKEA so much. Like, hate IKEA. We had a couple. Oh my gosh, I still can't believe I approved of this. It got published, so we'll say maybe there's a silver lining. But this wedding, the couple said, we want to have a lounge. We got them pricing for renting a lounge, and they were like, we could buy furniture for that price. And I was like, you could actually buy furniture for that price. So they did buy furniture from IKEA. And they said, they showed me everything they bought. And I was like, awesome. They sent me pictures. Well, they
I'm
sent me
scared.
pictures from the website. The furniture showed up in boxes.
OMG.
Uh-huh. Boxes, like boxes.
And
So of
IKEA
course,
stuff is really hard
what?
to put
I
together.
mean, when I tell you I hate IKEA, like with
Yes,
every ounce of my being, I'm like, nope, not buying it, not buying it. Don't care how cheap it is.
ever.
No, so I had to call my husband from the wedding because I didn't know it was coming in pieces. I thought it was coming. No,
Assembled.
they said, we'll have two of the guys drop it off early in the morning at the venue. I was like, perfect. It comes in boxes straight from IKEA. I call my husband. I'm like, you have to come. Like, I don't know what else to do. And we have kids. So he's
Oh
like,
my
I mean, let
gosh.
me see if I can find somebody to watch the kids. And what on earth? And you just smile.
Because what would you do? Here's what I know you wouldn't do as a business owner that is in growth mode and really
Yep.
wanting, like, you wouldn't have been like, sorry, I'm not putting your furniture together on the day of.
No,
No.
no.
So I think the answer to these things, like these mistakes
Yes.
that we have made, is that you have to set such clear, like defined boundaries
Yes.
on the front end
Yes.
of onboarding with a client that these things don't happen.
100%, because exactly like what you just said is what would you do? Even now, if that were to happen to us, I would still put the furniture together
Yep.
because there's no way I would say to a bride, I'm not doing this. However, I wouldn't have let myself get into the pickle in the first place because I've learned now when I have a client that says, can I provide my own lounge furniture? I'm like, absolutely. It must be put together and you must send people to put it in the place it needs to go.
And they have to pick it up
That
afterwards because
that's it.
I
It's
don't
gotta
have
be
a
gone.
truck. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be gone. Don't pick drunk people to pick it up, like,
Yes.
they need to be able to pick it up. So, yeah, I think that there's just and, like, we tell our clients now, they'll say, Oh, I'm getting a chandelier. Perfect. Or can you set up all of my items? Absolutely. Anything that we don't have to get on a ladder. We also won't
Mhm.
assemble your centerpieces, like things that we've just learned over the years, right? I mean, have you kind of changed your messaging a little bit?
100%. Yes, and I've added clauses into
Uh-huh.
my contract that
Mhm.
didn't exist back when some of these things would happen. Like, I have a professional vendor clause in my
Okay.
contract
Uh-huh.
where it says that these specific vendors, and I list them out, have to be professional vendors with business insurance and like
Yes.
certifications and everything, because I have had the aunt
Mm,
that is doing the flowers and leaves all the pieces all over the floor, or comes in
yes.
like, I need a refrigerator to store all of this
Kill me.
in. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's all of it,
Yes,
right?
yes. Or I've had the brother of the bride that is the DJ that doesn't bring the right like
Mm,
power hookup, blows the power, but he's not there when the power blows because he's in the buffet line. He's in the
hello.
buffet line.
Yes.
Yes.
And you just think to yourself, like, how did we get here? How did we get here? It's so crazy. Anyway, yeah, it's a lot. And I think it's so fun, but it's really does come with setting the boundaries and knowing really what questions to ask. Like I will say, and I don't know how you feel about this, Megan. You said that you added clauses to your contract. We've done that as well. But one thing I will say is to new planners or new vendors, don't put so much I won't do this into your contract that you almost it's like, well, what do you do? It makes it
Mhm,
a negative experience, and I've coached other wedding pros in that before. I'm like, I know that you've been burned by this, but
mhm.
either spin the messaging, like the professional vendors clause. I love that. That's not saying no, you can't have Aunt Sally as your florist. No, I
Right.
won't clean up your flowers. Like it's just saying these people need to be licensed and insured.
For the benefit of your event.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. And so that they kind of understand that. So always make sure when you're telling clients what you do and don't do, if a client says to us, I want to DIY my centerpieces, my, Aunt Sally is a florist, I'm like, absolutely. Let's talk about what that looks like for your wedding. And here's what we need. We're going to put that in writing and we're just going to make sure that everybody's on the same page. It's totally fine. We just want to make sure that everybody understands what the expectation is for Aunt Sally to do the flowers. Oy.
Yes. And I think, you know, going back to setting those clear expectations on the front end, we do have an onboarding process with our
Mhm,
clients with a
mhm.
guide. So we have it verbally that we'll go over with them, then we have it in writing. And it is a joyful call. It's not like
Yes,
this. It
yep,
is, we're so excited. We're kicking off our relationship together. Here's just some fun things that you'll want to know. We answer
yep,
some questions and frequently asked questions that are going to get them excited about some of the next steps that come with planning.
yeah,
Then we sprinkle in just some helpful content. And then we definitely sprinkle in things like, what's the best way to get a hold of my consultant? Or
yep,
is texting okay? Or is my consultant available to meet on nights and weekends? And
yep,
all of those answers are just professional and warm,
yep,
but they get the point across instead of us having to um, just answer it when it's asked. They know on the front end what that looks
yes.
like.
What those guidelines are. And I will say too, I think it looks different for everybody, and it really depends on your lifestyle. So Megan and I both have kids and we have husbands and families and teams to run. And so like one of my things is I'm not going to meet with you in the evening. It's not going to happen for me, but I have planners on my team who
Hmm.
much prefer to meet in the evening. They're not morning people. They don't really love meeting in the morning. They'd love to meet over a glass of wine instead of coffee. And I'm totally fine with that. I'm like, "Hey, if your client wants to meet in the evening and you're okay with that, I'm totally fine." So, as you're starting your own business or you're working through your own business, if it makes sense for you to take consultations on Saturday because you're still running your full-time hustle or you want to take whatever that looks like for you, it's totally fine. Just know what those boundaries are.
Know what those boundaries are. And then I'm pretty sure, Brandy, you talk about this regularly,
Mhm.
but make sure that you're constantly carving out time to check in and see what has changed so that you don't find yourself 5 years, 10 years into
Yes.
business and being like, what happened? I hate all my clients, right?
Yes, that's so true. And I think, what's really interesting to me, and we kind of touched on this in the beginning, is you will have clients that value you more as a human being when you are clear about what your boundaries are and you show that you respect yourself. Whatever those boundaries are, when you're just clear about it, your clients tend to respect just you as a human. And I do think that it helps the relationship a lot instead of the client just being like, do this.
Yes, I think it just establishes you as the expert that they are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Y- But going back to what you said, Brandy, be careful that it doesn't go too negative and too much
Yep.
down the I won't do this, 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 and this. Just
Yep.
this is what you've hired me for. We're so excited to be working with you. Here's some things that are going to make this relationship amazing
Yeah.
and all this helpful content for you as well. And I think if you have these boundaries, this was
Mhm.
another tip that I had written down was if you have these boundaries in place, you have to stick to them. You,
Yes.
you can't have them down and then push past them all the time.
And let it go. I mean, yeah, no, that's 100%. That's such a good one, Megan. I know that you had a couple tips for us. What are those tips that you would give to people that are listening?
Yes. Make sure, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you've got your own business, and if you're in the wedding industry, I mean, whether you're in the wedding industry or not, I think this is just really good for those that own a business is
Mhm.
make sure that you're carving out time away from your business, time like downtime, because we all have
What does
this
that look like?
tiny little, I know, right? We all have this tiny little computer that is attached to us 24
Mhm.
7. How many of you listening to this, you can just raise your hand if you're in your car or the shower or wherever you are, but how many of you check your email first thing in the morning, or it's
Mhm.
the last thing that you do at night,
Mhm.
or maybe just, I don't know, 734 times throughout the day, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I have made it to where my husband and I, because we're both entrepreneurs, which is,
Yes. Crazy.
same thing, it's a
It's
lot.
crazy.
We take one night off, like completely off a week, midweek on a Wednesday night, which maybe if you're listening to this and you have better boundaries than me, you're like, what? You work all the other nights?
You're so funny. Time out. Wait a second. Am I supposed to be working 6 nights a week? Hey
No, no,
guys.
no, no, no. You do what works for you. I have worked my schedule where I do have three very small children. So I
Yes.
stop my day earlier
Yeah.
and I am there, for school pickups and dinner and bedtime. And then I'm an evening person. My brain
Mhm.
works really well from like 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. So I like to do some work in the evening. I'm not a morning person. I don't wake up ready to pop out of bed and check all the things off my list. I'm more of a slow starter in the morning. So I like to do my workouts and like consume some education through podcast and books in the morning and then do my
Yeah.
work later in the day.
I love
Um,
that. That's great
yeah,
because I am a morning person, so I love
yes.
listening to somebody else that's like, "No, that's not really my thing." Like, I like doing it at night. So if you guys are listening to Megan and you're like, "Yes, she's my girl. Yes, it's okay. Figure out what works for you." And you do have small children. Mine are much older now, and so but I
Yours
do
are
remember
probably up when you're still up in the evenings,
for
right?
sure they are. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I miss those days. Well, I mean, I don't.
Mhm.
But I do
You do.
remember those days where they'd be in bed at 8 o'clock, and same thing. I would work after they went to bed because they were little. Now
Yeah.
that doesn't work for me. But seasons,
Yes, seasons,
what
absolutely,
works
and
for you?
that's what I love about these conversations with you
Hmm.
because we talked about this on my podcast that you do things one way, I do things another way. We still
Yes,
have a ton in common, and I love that
yes,
people can listen and pull what works for them.
100%.
But my husband and I do have one night where neither of us are on our computers. We actually try to like have a conversation and just hang out, maybe play a board game. Sometimes it's watch a movie, but
Yeah,
it's that time that we are not attached to our phone. So if you are that way and you're in
Mhm.
that hustle season and you're go, 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 especially if you're listening to this in the beginning of 2021 and you've
Yes.
got big goals and you're working towards them, just make sure to create some space for yourself and your partner, if you
Mhm.
have one, that is away from your business, because otherwise that hustle does turn to a little bit of resentment,
It
as we
does.
talked about earlier.
Yeah, I love that.
I have another tip.
Okay.
Oh, let's see, I wrote these down. Oh, my friend
Mhm.
Sam Jacobson, who is in the wedding industry as well, he has walked me through the idea of scope creep with clients.
Okay.
And scope creep here, if you don't know what this is where a client has booked you for something, but then they keep like creeping into needing more from you.
Uh-huh.
And this runs into many different industries, not just the wedding industry. But Sam gave me this brilliant tip on scope creep, where when you are putting together your packages for a prospective client, you have, your lower package, your mid tier package, and your top package. You really want to make sure that when you have had a conversation with the client, your things that you're starting to hear, like you're hearing things in that consultation, like, oh gosh, she's saying that her mother-in-law is going to be extra, or that she's not sure about the design, but she doesn't necessarily want to book that specific package. They want a
Mhm.
smaller package because they want to spend less.
Mhm.
That's fine, but make sure that you offer them a secondary package when you're sending things over to them that builds in the items that you know they're going to ask for that fall
Mm.
outside of that package that they book. So then when this client comes to you and says, hey, could you help us with XYZ? We just wanted to get your opinion on it, and you weren't
Mhm.
booked for that. This is a great way to check your boundaries. And instead of just doing it because you want to make them happy, this is where you say instead, absolutely. I would love to help you with that. That's more in line with package X,
Mhm.
and I would be happy to upgrade you to that package, or we can hop on a call and discuss like what that might look like, to
I
make
love
that
that.
switch. I got so much from Sam in that conversation, because what you most likely will do, if you aren't just setting it up for you to easily point back to your packages,
Yeah.
then you're just going to be like, oh, this is so awkward to have to tell them that like they didn't actually book this and it's going to be X amount extra.
Yeah, I think that I love that tip so much because I'm constantly telling my planners, if you let somebody take more service than they booked, you're actually doing a disservice to the people that paid you for that. That's really
Yes.
unfair to the clients who paid you for that. So you really have to set boundaries, and you have to know how to say that without saying you didn't book me for that, because no one
Hmm.
wants to hear that. That's a
No,
terrible
that
thing to
feels weird.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah, so being able to say, I would love to help you with that. Here's what that service looks like, but sending that to them in the beginning.
Beginning, instead of like awkwardly having to say this will be more money, you've
Yes.
already got it in their brain. They know that they didn't book that package. They may not remember, but it's much more gentler to be able to say, absolutely, that's more in line with package 3, which we can
Yep,
absolutely upgrade you to if you want to. And they're like,
absolutely.
huh, okay, yeah, that makes sense, I'll
I
do that.
love that tip. I love
Yes.
that.
I have one more
Okay,
tip for
I'm
you.
excited.
This one is carve out time for the crazy. And so, what I mean here is, no matter what, no matter how many boundaries you put in place, no matter how many great tips you have in your onboarding process, or
Mhm.
the number of things that you have them check off in the contract, you're still going to have those clients that don't read, that
Read a
don't
contract, Megan. Come
I
on.
know, I know, so crazy, right? So this is a tip that we started doing within our planning business that I have found to be helpful is, instead of having that client that texts you and is like, "Hey, do you have time for a quick call? It's an emergency. I need to chat." We put in set office hours each week that we let all of our clients know at the time that they book, here's a link. If you have a quick question or
Mhm.
you have something that you just need to get off your chest, you have access to this Acuity link that you can book. It's a quick, like 15-20 minute chat.
Mhm.
And it just creates space because I know when I'm looking at my week that like I have that time carved out should I have that crazy client that needs me immediately. And instead of stopping what I'm doing, which I know, Brandy, you in talking about productivity and like being focused, you don't want to
Yes.
stop what you're doing, drop everything, and go solve this quick emergency, which
Of
is
course.
probably not really an emergency.
No,
Um,
it's never an emergency.
you easily just direct them to a place where they feel, okay, she's got me. I'll be talking to her tomorrow at noon
Yes.
or this afternoon at 4 p.m., whatever works with your particular schedule.
Mhm.
But it's carving out time for them to feel like it's also really great at the beginning of the
Mhm.
relationship because they're like, wow, she's available to chat just if I have a question. And
Yeah,
most clients aren't going to use this. They're not going to abuse it,
you're right.
but it's those ones that are a little extra
Mhm.
that need it and are going to feel taken care of with it.
And I think that that's so important. So I'm really glad that that was one of your tips because what I want to make sure that everybody's not hearing is say no because that's not what I do. No, that's not what I do. I want you guys to feel the freedom to wow your clients and to go the extra mile, especially your package 3 clients who have like, "Hey, I paid you to I want you to do it." Like I want you
Hmm.
to be in it with me. And I love that about our clients is that we want to exceed their expectations. It's one of our very favorite things. There's a
Yes.
difference between exceeding expectations and creating boundaries. Boundaries are so different than that, but being able to create wow experiences or hearing that they're stressed about something or they're struggling with something and you can fix it in 1 second because
Hmm.
you have the knowledge that they don't. That's a wow. That's different than not creating boundaries.
Yeah, it really is. And I believe as well that the way that I built my planning business was
Mhm.
on following through on what I committed that I was going to do,
Yep.
exceeding expectations.
Mhm.
But I think that you can do those things while still respecting the fact that you are not meant to be available and at a client's beck and call
No.
24/7.
No.
And you need to hear that because when you go after a dream or you're just starting a business, you're willing to do anything and everything. And I joked that my ideal client 10 years ago was a breathing client that was planning any event.
That is so
Literally,
funny.
yeah, a breathing client.
Oh.
Ideal clients weren't really a thing when we were in business years and years ago. It was
No.
just clients.
Yes, no one
Yeah.
talked about ideal clients and if we're being honest, there is a difference when you're starting your business, you don't know quite yet what your ideal client is. Everyone says find your ideal client. Well, guess what? You find that person by working with people you really don't like and that you
Yes.
really do like. I mean, that's just that's
That
kind
is
of how
it.
it goes.
Let's do a workshop on that because there's a lot of content that
Yes.
industry experts are putting out there over like identify your ideal client avatar. And I'm like, no, just work with people and know who you don't want to work with
Yes.
again or create boundaries that are going
Yes.
to make it so that they're not so difficult to work with when you encounter another personality type like that.
No, that's so funny. I feel like, yes, 13 years ago, 100% my ICA was, "Are you breathing?" And and
Do
"Are
you
you
have
getting
an event?
married?"
Okay.
Yes, do you have an event? Exactly. That was the extent of qualifying a client. And now
Yes.
it's so much different. Like, I could totally write you a script of who our ideal client is, but that's not because we've we fell into that because it was like, we know we don't wanna work with these people and it's not because they're bad people, it wasn't who we aligned with. And
Mhm.
so, oh my gosh, Megan, this has been so fun. I feel like there's probably like 15 spin-off topics we could do just from this one
Yes.
podcast.
Yes.
It's so fun. So Megan, tell everybody where they can come find you because I know that they want to get so much more information from you.
Thank you. Yes, so you can find me most easily on Instagram. I have a podcast for wedding pros called Weddings for Real. So we're at Weddings for Real. And then I do have an education and community membership site for wedding planners called The Planners Vault. And you can find me at Planners Vault on Instagram there as well.
Yeah, you guys, I got to speak to Megan's Planners Vault membership several weeks ago back in November, and it was so awesome. I
They
loved it.
loved
This
you.
group is so engaged. They're so fun. I loved how engaged they were. So you've definitely grown a sweet community over there. And I think if you guys are planners and you're looking for resources and just a community to build on, like Megan's community is where it's at. So Megan, thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you for having me so much. This was a lot of fun.